Well, thanks for watching that Geert Wilders interview with me. It really was a journalistic feather in my cap. I was so grateful for the opportunity. But listen, there's important news going on in Canada. And one of the roles we have is to hold the NDP to account because the CBC and the rest of the regime media, they never really do. Whether it's Jagmeet Singh or Rachel Notley, they're more in the form of cheerleaders than actual journalists. Luckily, we have a real journalist on our team. Her name is Sheila Gunn-Reid. She's our chief reporter, and she broke some news about the NDP in Alberta. Sheila joins us now from her home in the Edmonton area. Sheila, great to see you again.
Thanks for having me on the show, boss.
Well, it's my pleasure. You know, I enjoy covering dramatic international stories from time to time, but Canada is our home. And, Jordan Peterson says, you want to save the world, start by cleaning up your room. We want to save the world, but we also have to pay attention to local matters, including Rachel Notley's NDP. What's the latest on her?
This is where I started. I feel like I've come full circle, holding the NDP to account on behalf of the people. What happened is that we received some leaked court documents from 2019, and they involved somebody named Ben Aldrit. Now, that might not be a name that a lot of people know, but he is frequently quoted in the media as being an NDP spokesperson. In fact, when all of this went down, he was the chief of staff to Sarah Hoffman, our health minister at the time. In December 2018, Ben Aldrit was arrested in a prostitution sting in Edmonton. And we know that because he made his first court appearance on it in January. And the NDP hushed this up because that was just 4 months before the election, wherein the United Conservative Party's Jason Kenney would sweep into power. And so they wanted to make sure that nobody knew anything about a staffer in their midst being accused of sexually exploiting vulnerable women. And I'm making an assumption here that it's a woman just based on, the overwhelming majority of these cases happen to be women. But if you look at Ben Aldrit's Twitter account, you might not know because he's got his pronouns in there. He calls himself a spouse and not a husband. He said he's the parent of a child, not the father of a son or daughter. So, I'm making a lot of assumptions here. But the NDP hushed this up. And for years, they put Ben Aldrit on a leave of absence quietly, but he recently came back into the fold. In 2021, he's quoted as a spokesperson for the NDP. And in 2022, I believe he was the director of communications for the NDP caucus. This went through 2 election cycles and not a single member of the mainstream media touched this story. I assume they probably knew about it, but if they didn't, they know now. And you know what? They haven't uttered a single word on this. And if you know that this was UCP, the mainstream media would be lighting their hair on fire about this.
Any crime is a serious matter if you're in the government. You have to be law-abiding. I'm not saying that there's no such thing as redemption or people paying their price and coming back. I actually, as I get older, I believe in second chances more, as long as you're contrite and have done a penance of some sort. But there's something a special character to sex crimes, especially prostitution. It's not just, it's not shoplifting or a drug offense, where frankly, and a lot of crimes are sort of victimless crimes, especially on the drug side of things. Well, it's probably not true. Your family is a victim. But when you engage in female trafficking, it is always under duress. And there's an exploitation there that is very political, and it's what feminists claim to be against. And that's why I think this is so noteworthy, is that the NDP will tell you that conservatives hate women and they are the champions of women. But here you have someone who exploited, trafficked women, who in many cases they have some psychological problems, some mental health problems. They're being abused and exploited by pimps and human traffickers. They are in an extreme position. And for a man to come and take advantage of them, and for that man to be in a feminist party is so gross. But how different is that from Trudeau, who sexually assaulted Rose Knight in BC and then later said, oh, she experienced it differently. There's nothing worse than a male feminist, Sheila.
And this guy apparently is a male feminist. If you go through his Twitter account, and I did, It's nothing but repeated instances where he is accusing the United Conservative Party about not caring about women, and in particular racialized women, to use his language. Well, guess who the majority of sex workers are on the streets of Edmonton? Racialized minority women. And this guy was exploiting them for his own sexual means. I'm reliably informed by the NDP that they don't care for the commodification of women's bodies. But they kept this guy in their midst. They covered up for him and then brought him back into the fold and gave him a promotion after all of it.
Well, let's not forget that Saint Jack Layton of the NDP was caught in a brothel, a massage parlor in Toronto by police with young immigrant women. And the police gave him a pass and the media gave him a pass. And it finally came out through citizen journalists. And I think the Toronto Sun, to their credit, did a story on it. But it was just completely forgotten about. And no mainstream reporter would dare sully themselves by asking a grubby little question like that. It was as if it was, oh, that's just Jack's private life. It's not a private life when you're exploiting minority immigrant women who have been trafficked. And just for Jack Layton to pass himself off as a male. There's nothing grosser. I think of Jian Ghomeshi of the CBC, who actually had a women's studies degree. And it's obvious now in retrospect why. That's where the women are. It's like asking Al Capone, why'd you rob banks? Well, that's where the money is. Why did you get a women's studies degree? Because that's where the women are. And these serial abusers, they are preemptively feminists to put everyone else on the back foot so you won't think that they're sexual predators, and to preemptively take away. I mean, I'm certain that Trudeau's entire feminist shtick is just a preemptive defense against questions about things like when he sexually assaulted Rose Knight in Creston, BC. It's so gross. What's he doing now? Is he still with the NDP?
That's not clear. He says he works in freelance communications, but like I said, up until very recently, he was being quoted in media reports as working for the NDP. When I did this story, he had the NDP URL, the link back to the website, in his Twitter bio. So, and even worse, I can't get the NDP to respond to this. I can't get him to respond to this. In an effort to be a responsible journalist, I reached out to both sides, and we are doing our best to get to the bottom of this. And like I said, if this were the UCP, it doesn't matter what the press conference is about. They would be absolutely hammered with questions about this. But all the mainstream media journalists have their blinders on. We even published the document so that people don't have to believe us, so that the mainstream media journalists, lazy little people that they are, they could take my work and turn up at a press conference and ask a question. They haven't done a single thing on this. Yeah.
And they wonder why no one trusts the mainstream media anymore. Hey, I got to tell you, I'm going on a cruise with a whole bunch of rebels. We're sailing out of Fort Lauderdale on March 23rd, 2024. That's not so far away, less than 6 months away. A gorgeous trip around the Caribbean. Holland America Line. Boy, is that luxurious. And we're going to bring some of our favorite rebel talent. Sheila Gunn Reid, David Menzies, and can you believe it? We're actually bringing Tamara Leach with us, and you are invited. That's rebelnewscruise.com.